Hello, how are you? This is the fourth part of a lecture series which is designed to uncover the story behind big numbers, behind the big data. So let's start with this first slide so that we can be on the same page. When we talk about fluctuations, normally fluctuations could be parameterized it could be a time series, it could be fluctuations as time progresses, or it could be fluctuations that you see as the length progresses. And normally you can choose a starting point, some x sub naught, and normally these observables, measured observables coming from, say, complex systems, when you look at them, they actually fluctuate, and we would like to know if there's a mathematical description and story behind these fluctuations. So let us parameterize the fluctuating observables, parameterize it in this way. We have the starting point x sub naught plus the fluctuations. Now, the fluctuations we will write in this manner. There are three functions here. You have the g function, which regulates and modulates the amount of fluctuations. It's outside the integral. Then we have a memory function. We have a time-dependent window, h function, and this g, f, and h, all of them modify an ordinary Brownian motion. And the x of t would stand for any fluctuating measurable observable that you are dealing with. It could stand, it could represent positions of probe particles in complex fluid, geomagnetic fluctuations. It could be DNA distances in a genome. It could be it could deal with stock prices or positions of typhoons, or the variations in the atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. And it could be essentially anything that you would like to deal with or to study. So just to familiarize ourselves with this type of parameterization, since actually g, f, and h functions would depend on the particular system that you are investigating. So we have this parameterization upstairs. Now let's take the simplest case. Suppose the functions g, f, and h, they're just equal to 1. So if you plug in these values of g, f, and h in here, then your integral would be something like just the integral of the dB. Integrating dB would just give you Brownian motion. And so we just get ordinary Brownian motion, and we all know that Brownian motion does not have any memory of the past. So it's a little bit less interesting. Let's deal with another choice of the functions g, f, and h. Example 2. So again, we have our mother expression. And suppose this time we choose the g and h to be equal to 1, and the memory function f is given by this. Then if you plug in these values of g, h, and f in here, then you get the expression, standard expression for the fractional Brownian motion in the Riemann-Liouville representation. Here h is the Hurst exponent or Hurst coefficient, and when h is between 0 and 1/2, it would actually exhibit subdiffusion. When h is less than 1 but greater than 1/2, it will exhibit or perform superdiffusion. And when h is exactly equal to 1/2, then you have ordinary Brownian motion. And you can see that just plug in h equal to 1/2, and then you will see that it would reduce to ordinary Brownian motion. Fractional Brownian motion is actually a good way of introducing what we mean by memory. So what is memory? For the fractional Brownian motion, when we have h less than 1/2, you have this so-called short memory domain, where each step of the Brownian motion are negative. Each step, its neighboring steps would be negatively correlated. And for the Hurst exponent greater than 1/2, the the diffusion steps are positively correlated. And here, this would be the usual Brownian motion that we have. And so we have subdiffusion if it's less than 1/2, H is what less than 1/2, and superdiffusion when you have H greater than 1/2. And fractional Brownian motion is actually very popular and a favorite. So there have been many publications on fractional Brownian motion in the past. So for example, this paper appeared in a biophysical journal, and it's applied to biology. It talks about fractional Brownian motion in dealing with telomere. And you can also use fractional Brownian motion to discuss about mathematical finance. Or you can use FBM, or fractional Brownian motion, to study, investigate crowded fluids such as the human cell. And also, again, another paper on financial modeling or dealing with economic modeling, and so on and so forth. And there's a huge literature dealing with fractional Brownian motion. But the topic that we're going to deal with today is beyond fractional Brownian motion. And in fact, fractional Brownian motion is just a special case. So let's go back to our parameterization of the initial point plus fluctuation. So we had something like this. So again, this is just the regulating function, and this is the time window, the memory function. And we ask ourselves the question, how do we solve for the probability density function for this type of fluctuating parameter? First, we observe that the way we parameterize our fluctuating variable x capital T is such that the initial point is actually fixed. So we have initial point plus fluctuation, and it could end anywhere. At some final time, capital T, the fluctuation could end anywhere, but we just have the initial point fixed. So pictorially, we could have something like this. So the fluctuation starts at some initial point T naught. It ends at some final time T. So this is the time axis. It progresses. And at final time T, the point where the diffusion ends could be somewhere here. It could be somewhere here. It could be somewhere here. It could in fact be anywhere at some final time T. Now suppose we want a situation wherein our chosen endpoint is somewhere, let's pick this point x sub t. We want that to be the final position when we hit the final capital T. How do we do that? Well, we can fix the endpoint. We can pin down the endpoint to some particular chosen point x sub t at final time t equal to t using this Dirac delta function, which is actually always equal to 0 except when x capital T is equal to x sub t. And just note that this x sub t here can be written as our initial point plus fluctuation, and note that the Dirac delta function is always 0. This is always equal to 0, and only at the point where your initial point plus fluctuation hits your chosen endpoint would it light up, would it spike. Otherwise, outside of that situation, it's always equal to 0. So we have constrained our path such that only those which give contributions to this series of paths, non-zero contribution, would come into the picture. So we have something like this. Again, we start at t naught, ending at some final time t, and all the other paths which does not satisfy the Dirac delta function or Donsker delta function vanishes. All the other paths would vanish, and only those which end up at our chosen endpoint x sub t would survive. So we can sum over all paths to get the expectation value of this delta function or the probability density function. So now, if we ask the question, what is the expectation value of this Donsker delta function? The probability density function is actually given by this expectation value. So what we will do is we can sum over all non-zero contributing paths, and summing is actually integrating everything, and we have to use the in the integration or in the summation, we have to use the Gaussian white noise measure, because inside this x capital of T is actually a white noise variable. So this delta function is a white noise functional, and to integrate that you have to make use of the Gaussian white noise variable. Now, in order to evaluate this and get the probability density function, our first step will be to express the Donsker delta function in terms of its Fourier representation. That means whatever is inside here will be exponentiated and will be put inside this exponential. So that's the first step in our calculation. If we can evaluate this, then we're done. Again, we're home. We have a closed form for the PDF or probability density function. So now we have this expression. So the integration over all paths, non-vanishing paths, we express the delta function in terms of its Fourier representation. So since we express the delta function in terms of its Fourier representation, it introduces an additional integral. It's integral over dk, aside from the original integration over the Gaussian white noise measure. So again, we could write this explicitly, that since the x of t is actually the initial point plus our fluctuation. Now, we can proceed with our calculation. So if we can do these two integrals, integral over dk and integral over d mu, then we're done. We're happy and we can celebrate. But to carry out, so to do this, we have to first separate the terms, and I will separate the terms such that I take out this x naught and x of t and put it in here, because this part here does not depend on the white noise random variable. So I separate all those which depends on the white noise random variable omega, and then I could actually carry out this integration over the d mu. How can I do that? So let's look at this integration over the Gaussian white noise variable. The integration over the Gaussian white noise variable, which looked like this in the previous page. If we now let this k, g, function f, and function h, if we let it call it some c, okay, then this integral over the d mu would look like your characteristic functional. Okay, so if you let this k, g, f, and h be c, then it would simply look like this. And this is the definition of the Gaussian white noise measure actually. And on the right hand side is the integrated form. You don't have the Gaussian white noise variable anymore on the right hand side. So in that sense, this is already the integration over the mu. So if you do that, plug in the psi, and your answer is just integral of c squared, then your probability density function can now be written in this manner. So the integration over d mu gives you a c squared, but c squared is actually k squared. So we have this k squared, g squared, f and h squared, because that's a square of this c. And so we're done with one of the integration, which was the integration over the Gaussian white noise measure d mu. So the last integration that we have to perform in order to get a closed form for the PDF is this integral over the dk. Of course, the dk came about because we expressed the Dirac delta function in terms of its Fourier representation. But luckily, fortunately, it's very easy to carry out this dk integration. Let's look at this. So we have this expression, And the integration over dk is actually a Gaussian integral. So if you look at Grad-Stein and Resik, for example, this is an expression for the result of the dk integration. So all you have to do is to look for the coefficient of k and coefficient of k squared uh, in your original expression, and the right hand side is just in terms of the q and p, and by identification, then you can carry out the dk integration, and you arrive at the closed form of the probability density function. So after carrying out the necessary integrations over the dk and the d mu, we arrive at the final form of the probability density function. And depending on the physical system that you're studying, you can make explicit the form of the functions g, f, and h. Let's have a couple of examples. Suppose, again, this is the simplest case. We choose g and h to be equal to 1, and f is not really a function but some constant, where d would be the diffusion coefficient. Then plugging in this g, h, and f into your mother expression, then you get the probability density function for ordinary Brownian motion. A second example, the second example would be this. This time, suppose you choose g and h to be equal to 1, and your memory function to be of this form. Then plugging in these values into your original expression for the PDF, then you get the probability density function appropriate for fractional Brownian motion. So in the succeeding lectures, we will choose other values of the G, F, and H and see some things that are interesting. Thank you.